Shavua Tov. This week's Parsha portion is Behalotcha. The Parsha begins with a very famous description of the commandment to Aharon HaKohen, the great priest, of how he is to light, to ignite the menorah in the tabernacle and the Mishkan and Beis HaMikdash every day, and how that service needs to be done. Now, one of the verses in the description of how Aharon is commanded to light the menorah is the verse says like this in Hebrew: El mul pnei hamenorah ya'iru shivat hanerot. All the candles need to shine, need to be facing the centerpiece, the center of the menorah. Now, the Torah, when it describes this, literally what it means is that the flasks of oil faced the direction of the center of the menorah. But when the Torah describes this, it literally says not all candles, it says all 7 candles, all 7 lights, all 7 wicks and flames must face the center. Now, how was the menorah built? It was built in a way that there were stems coming out of every side of a centerpiece. And we have 3 stems on each side. And the final stem, the 7th candle, is actually the centerpiece itself. So the centerpiece doesn't face anywhere. There are only 6 candles facing the center, and the 7th one is the center itself. So this is what the Ishbitz of the Mei HaShilach asks in the beginning of this portion. What does the Torah mean when it says that all 7 candles need to face the centerpiece? The 7th candle is the centerpiece; it's not facing itself. In order to explain this, he says again, like he's accustomed to a beautiful psychological concept. He says that every person needs to have like a compass in life. Every person has a direction. Now, in order to strengthen my direction, like the idea he's talking about is that we want to face HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We want to guide ourselves or zero ourselves in around Hashem's will. What does Hashem want from me? So it could very well be that every person, it's a certainty that every person who's seeking to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he goes through a certain process of searching and seeking and yearning in life, and also devotion and sacrifice, self-sacrifice, whatever he goes through in order to sort of funnel himself in the correct direction. He compromises, he makes efforts, and finally, Bezrat Hashem, a person manages to make the right choice, to go in the right direction. Not only go in the right direction, also to set his life, set his soul, his ambitions, his goals in a path that's directed by the correct set of rules. Again, so you zero in, you reboot your compass. You have a compass, like a mental compass, like a conscience, you could say. And once you focus yourself correctly, initially maybe I had all sorts of considerations of what direction I want to take in life, but I made my decisions and I rebooted my compass around those decisions. So if I'm looking to serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I want to grant Hashem's will a lot of volume and value in my life so that it pulls me and drives me in the correct direction. And once I've done that, again, my life is sort of set on track in that direction. That's called facing the centerpiece. That I need to, every person has to find like a centerpiece of value. Again, the simplest thing is Hashem. Hashem is the centerpiece of value. What HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants from us, what our Creator wants from us. And we need to give it, even though in our initial intuitive nature, so we might not feel that that's something so valuable, or it's such a pull. Maybe we think so, but it doesn't occupy us so much. We need to grant it a lot of volume. So there's a lot of work and effort, good, blessed effort put into rebooting my system. Where my first nature is probably where I'm very self-involved, and I grant a lot of value to what I feel like doing, and I need to reassess. And when I reassess, then I can reposition a critical mass of value on Hashem's will, and that reboots my system. Now, all of my life, I'm going to educate my kids that way. I'm going to guide my efforts in aspirations that way. So every person goes through this process in life. And that process of, again, zeroing yourself in around a compass, around a direction which you choose as a valuable direction, that process is called facing the centerpiece. That's how he describes. Now, what does it mean that the centerpiece itself? Why do all 7 candles have to face the centerpiece? So he says that just by, again, rebooting your system and kind of creating an inertia where you follow this path that you've put yourself on, so you lose sensitivity to the frischkeit, again, the freshness of Hashem's will. And you kind of honor a system and a set of values that you've adopted. And maybe when I adopted these values, so they were very again, very revolutionary to me, and I was very, very devoted. But once I set myself in a path, so I'm kind of on autopilot now. And there's a certain lack of sensitivity to Hashem's precise, specific will. Again, like a person who's working by a set of laws and rules, so he's not straying right or left on the one hand, but when you, like a person who did tshuva, like about tshuva. So at first there's a lot of passion in the tshuva, a lot of sensitivity and will and yearning to know what Hashem wants of me. But once I find a path, so I kind of find myself set in inertia in this direction that I've set myself on. And in a sense, I lose that sensitivity. I don't need it anymore because I'm driving the right path. So this is a concept that's very, very prominent in all of his Torah, is that you can never really, like every individual person, every individual moment, every individual scenario in life is something unique, and Hashem wants something very specific, and you can't derive that will. You can't focus yourself directly on that will just by abiding by a set of laws. You have to develop a sensitivity to hear, like a prophecy, to hear what is that Hashem wants from you right now. Now, in the fresh stages of one's yearning and search for a path, so there's a lot of sensitivity. But once you've set yourself on a path, so you sort of lose that sensitivity. And in order to be able to remain, again, acute and sensitive to what Hashem specifically wants from you in life, you have to be able to not only face the center, you have to also be able to reboot the center, to constantly be willing to reassess what your center point is. That's how he describes this verse, that all 7 candles need to face the center. So there's like a center, and there's a center to the center, which we can, again, that's how he describes it. It's like facing Hashem's will, and then there's remaining sensitive to why Hashem wants what he wants. Again, to remain sensitive to Hashem himself within the will, not just the dry rules that you derived from Hashem's will, but to remain sensitive to the vividness, and the labadikness, the freshness of what Hashem wants right now. And in order to do that, you have to also be willing to actually reassess your center and zeroize your compass. Again, you can't just funnel yourself once. You have to also be willing to reboot what you consider to be your centerpiece. So everybody has to have a compass. But other than having a compass, you also have to be willing to reboot your compass periodically. And the sensitivity to do that is what the 7th candle has to focus also towards the center, which is like the center of the center, Hashem himself within the will. And that's already in of itself a beautiful idea. And this is what he describes as Parsha. But we'll say one more thing that he describes, and he connects it to the end of the Parsha. In the end of the Parsha, there's also a very famous story of how Aaron and Miriam, Moshe Rabbeinu's brother and sister, they make derogatory comments about him, and they criticize his behavior, how he left his wife. He didn't leave her, but he doesn't live with her in a natural manner since the granting of the Torah on Mount Sinai. He never returned to a natural human family life. And they're critical about that, and they voice their criticism, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu isn't pleased by that. They get punished. There's a whole story, and the Miriam has tzara'at. She needs to be expelled from the campsite. There's a very famous story evolving around this situation. Now, how does the Ishbitzer connect this? He says that how does one reboot his compass? Again, funneling into a center point, that's very important, but you also have to maintain this sensitivity, maintain this freshness. And in order to reboot the set of rules itself, like to reboot your compass itself, then you can't do that by analyzing and debating and being more and more correct. Again, funneling myself in the correct direction, like finding a compass, finding the centerpiece, that you do by assessment. The person needs to be critical of himself and be true and yearn and want to serve Hashem, and also assess and use all the tools Hashem gave us in order to find the truth in life and focus myself on my shlichut, focus myself on what Hashem wants of me, and do things in a good way. You need to assess and find the true centerpiece. But in order to reboot the center itself, like what are your axiomatic assumptions that you've set yourself on? So you can't do that just by assessing. You have to be willing. You need to entertain a willingness to make a mistake. This is, again, another beautiful idea that he inserts here. That the rebooting of the centerpiece itself, the 7th candle, that can only be done by a mental willingness to fall, to make a mistake, to hit the wall. And the only way that you can reassess the center is like an admittance, like a mental admittance that you admit to yourself of being wrong. So he says that in order for Moshe Rabbeinu himself to realize a new truth, or Miriam and Aaron, like the tzaddikim themselves, which are these people are the eyes of the nation. They are the compass itself. But in order for the compass to remain sensitive to Hashem's right now, to Hashem's vivid will, the sensitivity, in order to maintain it, they themselves need to be willing to be mistaken, to fall. So the whole story of Moshe Rabbeinu's flaw being revealed, and that itself being a flaw of who said it, and all the tzaddikim in this parsha, there's this mishap where everybody makes a mistake. Moshe and Aaron and Miriam reveal Moshe's mistake, and by doing so, they made a mistake of speaking Lashon Hara. And the Ishmael says that speaking, like taking the compass itself and allowing yourself to make a mistake, that is what reboots the centerpiece itself, reboots your compass. He quotes a very beautiful phrase that we'll quote in Hebrew and explain it because his interpretation is so wonderful. He quotes from Mishlei. The phrase says, "Yakar michochma vekavod sichlut me'at." That's a verse in Mishlei, in Proverbs. Again, so I'll say it in Hebrew again. Yakar michochma vekavod sichlut me'at, which literally means that more valuable or more precious than wisdom and honor is a small amount of folly. And a tiny bit of folly can be more precious, more valuable than all the wisdom and honor that a person has. So usually this is interpreted by Rashi and the commentators on this verse, that a person can do a lot of very great things in life, and just one tiny mistake, can lose all of his fame and fortune, lose all of his wisdom and pride and honor. But he explained, so that would mean that the more valuable here, with a small amount of folly is more valuable, means that it can undermine all of your, not that it's really more valuable than your pride and wisdom, but it undermines your pride and wisdom. But he explains the verse even in a more literal sense. The Ishmael's explanation, which is again somewhat a new explanation. Nobody says this, but when you contemplate on it, it's actually nearer to the simple pshat of what the verse says. He explained this way, that sometimes your willingness to entertain the smallest folly, like your willingness to be wrong, is more precious than all of your evaluation, all of your intelligence, all of your greatness, all of what you're correct, all of your being a tzaddik. Your willingness to make a mistake, or entertaining the notion of being mistaken, your willingness to entertain that notion, and which again enables you to reboot the root of the system, not just to funnel yourself correctly, but to reboot the funnel. So that's more precious than all of your correct assessments. Again, the ability to reassess the axiomatic assumptions in the base of your assessments is more precious than all of your assessments. So the tiny little folly is actually more precious than all of your wisdom and honor. So again, that's the verse he quotes to convey this idea that is happening in our parsha and is already described in the beginning of the parsha. That all 7 candles, like the Torah says, all the 7 candles, including the centerpiece itself, also needs to be centered and recentered to the center itself. And that's done by a mental willingness to entertain my mistake, my mistakenness, being mistaken. And by being mistaken, you can reboot your entire system, all the grounds on which all your system is built. Mizrat Hashem, so this is probably a parasha that we can all have very new beginnings, new mental beginnings, like lose all assumptions and build a new set of axiomatic assumptions, a new faith, a new Torah. Mizrat Hashem. So Shavua Tov to everyone.